The world after 1945 was cleaved in two, an ideological chasm separating East from West. On one side, the capitalist democracies of the United States and its allies. On the other, the communist monolith of the Soviet Union. This was the Cold War, a global struggle for dominance fought not with direct military confrontation, but through proxy wars, espionage, and a relentless competition for technological and ideological supremacy. And nowhere was this contest more spectacularly waged than in the cold, unforgiving vacuum of outer space. For the Soviet Union, the space race was more than a scientific endeavor. It was a cosmic battle for the hearts and minds of humanity, a potent symbol of communism's inherent superiority. Every orbital success was trumpeted as a triumph of the Soviet system, a testament to the brilliance of its engineers and the strength of its collective will. Failure, however, was not merely an option. It was an anathema, a concept utterly incompatible with the carefully constructed narrative of socialist infallibility. The shockwave that rippled across the globe on October 4, 1957, was audible even in the silence of space. From the desolate steppes of Kazakhstan, a small Polyshan sphere named Sputnik 1 ascended, becoming the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. Its simple, insistent beep 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 was more than a radio signal. It was a declaration, a challenge, and a profound psychological blow to the United States. Suddenly, the Soviets were not just catching up, they were leading, literally looking down on the world from above. This initial victory ignited a furious response in the West, but within the Soviet Union, it cemented an unspoken rule: the lead must be maintained. The pressure on Sergei Korolev, the brilliant and enigmatic chief designer, and his vast network of scientists, engineers, and cosmonauts became immense, almost unbearable. They were the spearhead of the nation's pride, tasked with delivering one propaganda victory after another, no matter the cost, no matter the risk. The very fabric of the Soviet state was built upon a foundation of secrecy, a dense fog of controlled information and hidden truths. For the space program, this opacity was magnified tenfold. Every detail, every design, every launch was a state secret, guarded with a zeal bordering on paranoia. The world beyond the Iron Curtain saw only the triumphant headlines, the carefully curated photographs, the beaming faces of the cosmonauts. What transpired behind the barbed wire fences of Baikonur, or within the hushed corridors of Star City, remained shrouded in an impenetrable veil. This pervasive culture of secrecy meant that mistakes were not just swept under the rug, they were erased from existence. Accidents, malfunctions, and near catastrophes were simply never reported, never acknowledged. The official narrative allowed no room for imperfection, no space for human error, or the inherent dangers of pioneering the unknown. For those working within the system, this created an environment of profound psychological pressure, where admitting a flaw could be seen as a betrayal, and failure could carry severe, even life-threatening consequences. The world watched captivated as the Soviet Union continued its spectacular series of firsts. On April 12, 1961, humanity itself transcended its earthly bounds. Yuri Gagarin, a young, charismatic pilot with an unforgettable smile, became the first man in space aboard Vostok 1. His 108-minute orbital flight was a monumental achievement, a moment of universal awe that cemented his status as a global hero and the ultimate symbol of Soviet triumph. The image of Gagarin, the perfect Soviet man, became etched into the collective consciousness, a beacon of communist progress. But behind the dazzling facade of Gagarin's heroism, the program was a crucible of immense risk. The Vostok capsule was a marvel of engineering for its time, yet it was also a gamble, rushed into production under an unrelenting timetable. The margin for error was razor thin, and the lives of the cosmonauts were in essence expendable in the relentless pursuit of propaganda victories. Every subsequent first, the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, in June 1963, the first multi-person crew aboard Voskhod 1 in October 1964, the first spacewalk by Alexei Leonov in March 1965. Each was a hammer blow in the ideological war, demonstrating Soviet technological prowess to a captivated and often fearful world. Yet these triumphs came at a profound human cost, a toll meticulously hidden from the public eye. The urgency to achieve these milestones often superseded safety protocols, pushing the boundaries of engineering and human endurance to their breaking point. Engineers were pressured to cut corners, cosmonauts were trained to accept extreme risks, and the entire system was geared towards presenting an unblemished record of success, regardless of the grim reality. The very lack of open discourse, the absence of independent scrutiny, meant that lessons learned from near disasters or even minor accidents were not shared, not analyzed transparently. Instead, they were buried deep within classified archives, their potential to inform future safety improvements lost to the imperative of secrecy. This created a dangerous feedback loop, where the same mistakes could be, and often were, repeated. The inherent dangers of space travel, amplified by this culture of haste and concealment, laid the groundwork for tragedies that would remain officially unacknowledged for decades. It was within this shadowy landscape that the concept of phantom cosmonauts began to take shape, individuals whose contributions, and ultimately their fates, were meticulously scrubbed from the historical record. They were the silent casualties of the space race, their existence denied, their sacrifices unmourned by the state they served. The Iron Curtain in orbit was not just a metaphor, it was a brutal reality, ensuring that the Soviet Union's darkest chapters in space would remain buried, waiting for a future generation to unearth the truth. The stage was now set, not just for groundbreaking achievements, but for the profound and unacknowledged human cost of a nation obsessed with cosmic supremacy. In the chilling grip of the Cold War, as humanity strained its gaze towards the stars, a profound silence often shrouded the Soviet Union's ambitious reach into the cosmos. While official communiques trumpeted triumph after triumph, celebrating Sputnik, then Laika, and finally Yuri Gagarin's historic flight, a darker current ran beneath the surface, a whispered counter-narrative of catastrophic failures, of brave cosmonauts launched into the void, never to return. These were the phantom cosmonauts, their stories erased, their fates buried beneath layers of state secrecy. Before any official record could be scrutinized, before declassified documents offered glimpses of truth, the first echoes of these lost souls began to resonate, picked up not by sophisticated government intelligence, but by a pair of audacious amateur radio operators in the heart of Italy. The space race was not merely a contest of technology and daring, it was a battle for hearts and minds, a propaganda war fought on the ultimate frontier. For the Soviet Union, any deviation from a flawless narrative was unthinkable. Failures were not simply unacknowledged, they were systematically expunged from history, leaving gaping holes in the official chronology that Western observers, peering through the Iron Curtain, found deeply unsettling. This climate of suspicion and deliberate obfuscation created fertile ground for speculation, for the belief that the Soviets would go to any lengths to maintain their image of invincibility in space. It was against this backdrop of global tension and cosmic aspiration that Achille and Giovanni Giudica Cordiglia, two young brothers from Turin, Italy, embarked on their extraordinary endeavor. Driven by an insatiable curiosity and a passion for radio technology, they had, by the late 1950s, established a sophisticated listening post in an abandoned German bunker on the outskirts of their city. Armed with homemade antennas, modified receivers, and an acute understanding of orbital mechanics, they began their vigil, listening to the heavens, hoping to catch the faint signals of mankind's nascent journey beyond Earth. Their journey began innocently enough, tracking the beeps of Sputnik 1 in October 1957, then Sputnik 2 carrying Laika. Their intercepts were often clearer and earlier than those reported by official Western agencies, earning them a quiet reputation for technical prowess. But their ambition soon shifted from mere tracking to a more profound, more dangerous form of eavesdropping. They weren't just listening for signals. They were listening for star voices. Star, 4, the sounds of human life, hoping to intercept Soviet manned missions long before Moscow chose to announce them. They were in essence trying to pierce the cosmic veil of Soviet secrecy with nothing more than ingenuity and persistence. Then, in May 1960, the airwaves brought something chillingly unexpected. On May 17th, the brothers claimed to have picked up the frantic, labored breathing and a distinct, accelerating heartbeat of a cosmonaut in severe distress. The signal, they reported, was fading, the heartbeat growing weaker, before it disappeared entirely. They deduced it was a manned mission, launched and lost, perhaps a precursor to a Vostok flight, suffering a catastrophic re-entry failure. The official Soviet record for May 1960 remained, as always, silent on any manned launch. The brothers' recording, though fragmented and open to interpretation, became the first tangible proof for many that the Soviets were indeed losing cosmonauts in secret. This alleged intercept was quickly followed by another, even more disturbing. In November 1960, just as the world braced for another monumental Soviet space achievement, the brothers reported capturing a clear SOS signal, transmitted in Morse code, emanating from a spacecraft rapidly moving away from Earth. The message, repeated over and over, was a desperate plea for help. They theorized it was a manned mission that had veered off course, launched into deep space with no hope of return, its occupants doomed to drift eternally. Again, Moscow remained utterly silent, dismissing any such claims as Western propaganda. The intensity of their intercepts seemed to escalate with each passing month. On May 16, 1961, barely a month after Yuri Gagarin's celebrated flight, the Judica Cordelia brothers claimed to have recorded a woman's voice, clear and undeniably human, broadcasting from orbit. Her words, translated from Russian, were filled with growing panic, describing a cabin temperature rising, a trajectory going awry, and a final desperate cry of "I feel hot" before her transmission was cut short. The emotional weight of this intercept was immense. If true, it meant not only a lost cosmonaut, but a lost star female star cosmonaut, a pioneer whose sacrifice would never be acknowledged. Perhaps the most visceral and terrifying of their alleged recordings came in February 1962. On the 2nd of that month, the brothers asserted they intercepted sounds that painted a horrifying picture, a capsule breaking apart in orbit. They describe hearing distinct crackling, then the sound of metal groaning under immense stress, followed by a series of muffled thuds and explosions, culminating in a terrifying silence. It was, they concluded, the sound of a manned spacecraft disintegrating, its occupants perishing violently in the hostile vacuum of space. These were not just whispers, these were the alleged death rattles of unacknowledged heroes, played out over the crackle of a radio. How did these two young men, with their amateur setup, manage to achieve what professional intelligence agencies struggled with? Their method was a blend of technical ingenuity and sheer dedication. They meticulously tracked satellite orbits, predicted launch windows, and constantly refined their antenna arrays, often climbing their tower in the dead of night to make adjustments. Their equipment, though improvised, was surprisingly effective, allowing them to pick up faint signals that might otherwise be dismissed as atmospheric noise. They were true pioneers of radio astronomy, operating years ahead of their time, and their initial verifiable intercepts of Soviet missions gave their more controversial claims a powerful, unsettling credibility. The Western world, particularly the media, seized upon the Judica Cordelia brothers' allegations with a mixture of fascination and alarm. Newspapers across Europe and America ran sensational headlines, speculating about the identity of the lost cosmonauts and the extent of Soviet secrecy. Intelligence agencies, though publicly cautious, undoubtedly paid close attention, recognizing the potential propaganda coup if these claims could be substantiated. The brothers were interviewed extensively, their recordings played and replayed, fueling a pervasive belief that the Soviet Union was indeed sacrificing lives in its relentless pursuit of space dominance, then erasing their very existence. For the Soviets, the brothers' claims were predictably met with absolute indignant denial. They dismissed the recordings as hoaxes, as crude fabrications designed to undermine the glorious achievements of Soviet cosmonautics. The propaganda machine worked overtime to discredit the Judica Cordelia brothers, painting them as Western stooges, fabricating lies for political gain. But behind the Iron Curtain, no counter-evidence, no official data, no alternative explanations were ever offered. There was only silence, a void as vast and impenetrable as space itself, leaving the accusations to hang heavy in the air. Yet, even among Western experts, skepticism began to emerge. Critics pointed to the inherent difficulties of interpreting fate radio signals, especially across vast distances and through atmospheric interference. Could the heartbeat be static? Could the SOS be a misinterpreted telemetry signal? Could the woman's voice be a recording played through a distorted channel, or even a hoax designed to mislead? The technical challenge of distinguishing genuine human distress from the myriad of sounds in the cosmos, or from deliberate deception, was immense. Without access to Soviet launch data, telemetry, or even their official mission logs, which would remain hidden for decades, definitive proof remained elusive. Despite the debates and the doubts, the Giudica-Cordiglia brothers remained steadfast in their convictions, never retracting their claims. Their story and their alleged recordings became a cornerstone of the lost cosmonauts mythos, a persistent and haunting legend that has captivated public imagination for generations. They forced the world to confront the uncomfortable possibility that the official narrative of space exploration was, at best, incomplete and at worst, a deliberate deception. The echoes from the void, captured by two amateur enthusiasts in a bunker outside Turin, continued to reverberate. They posed a profound question: what other truths lay hidden beneath the triumphant veneer of the Soviet space program? What other sacrifices had been made? What other lives lost in the relentless push towards the stars? Their allegations, whether ultimately proven or disproven, tore a crucial hole in the Iron Curtain's cosmic fabric, demanding a deeper, more critical examination of history, a search for the names and stories that the Soviet Union had so desperately tried to bury. The silence was deafening, a vast echoing void that stretched not only across the cosmos, but also across the impenetrable Iron Curtain. For decades, the Soviet Union's space program was a beacon of national pride, a testament to socialist triumph, its every success trumpeted to the world. But behind the celebratory parades and the beaming smiles of its heroes, a different narrative unfolded, one of relentless pressure, unimaginable risk, and profound tragedy. As the Cold War thawed and the Soviet Union eventually crumbled, cracks began to appear in that meticulously constructed facade. What emerged was not a flood, but a trickle of truth, often decades late, revealing some star of the previously hidden costs of humanity's reach for the stars. Limited declassified information, painstakingly pieced together from fragmented archives and reluctant confessions, began to shed light on incidents that had been buried under layers of secrecy. These were the losses the Soviet state could no longer entirely deny, though the full, agonizing details often remained obscured. Consider the harrowing fate of Valentin Bondarenko. For years, his name was absent from Soviet space history, a ghost in the machine. It was only in the late 1980s, amidst the reformist fervor of glasnost, that the true story of his death, on March 23, 1961, finally surfaced. Just 18 days before Yuri Gagarin's historic flight, Bondarenko, a promising young cosmonaut in training, was conducting a 10-day endurance experiment in an oxygen-rich isolation chamber at the Institute of Biomedical Problems in Moscow. He carelessly dropped an alcohol-soaked swab onto an electric hot plate. In the pure oxygen environment, the swab instantly ignited, and the fire rapidly consumed his non-fireproof tracksuit. The pressure difference made it impossible to open the sealed chamber for several minutes. By the time medical staff reached him, Bondarenko had suffered third-degree burns over 90% of his body. He died 16 hours later. The state buried him quietly, his identity as a cosmonaut erased from all official records, his face airbrushed from photographs. His tragedy was deemed an inconvenient truth, too damaging to the narrative of Soviet perfection to ever be acknowledged. This chilling incident, belatedly confirmed through the slow opening of archives, offered a glimpse into the systemic secrecy that permeated every aspect of the Soviet space program. It underscored the lengths to which the authorities would go to protect their image, even at the expense of human dignity and historical accuracy. Similarly, while the world knew of Vladimir Komarov's tragic demise aboard Soyuz 1 in April 1967, the full extent of the design flaws, the desperate attempts to save him, and the chilling final communications were only gradually revealed. Early official reports spoke of a technical malfunction, but declassified documents and survivor accounts later painted a much grimmer picture: a rushed mission, known defects, and Komarov's agonizing awareness of his impending doom as his parachute failed and his capsule hurtled towards the Earth. These belated revelations, while significant, were often carefully curated, offering just enough truth to satisfy international inquiry without truly opening the floodgates. They provided an official narrative for Star-Some-Star previously hidden incidents, acknowledging the lives lost, but often sanitizing the details or omitting crucial context. What official records now reveal, then, is a partial truth, a carefully constructed mosaic, designed to manage perception rather than deliver full transparency. The files confirm the existence of certain failures, the deaths of Star-Some-Star individuals, but they stop short of answering the deepest, most unsettling questions. For every tragedy reluctantly acknowledged, there remain persistent, unconfirmed stories, whispers carried on the static of old radio waves, fragments of alleged recordings, and eyewitness accounts dismissed as fantasy. These are the truly phantom cosmonauts, whose fates remain shrouded in a mystery so profound that their very existence is still fiercely debated. These are the men and women who, according to legend, ventured into the vast unknown and never returned, their missions erased, their names condemned to oblivion by a state that could not afford the stain of failure. The most compelling and controversial evidence for these lost cosmonauts comes from outside the Soviet Union, from two Italian brothers, Achille and Giovanni Giudica Cordiglia, operating a listening post in Torre Bert, near Turin, during the height of the Cold War. These amateur radio enthusiasts possessed sophisticated equipment and an uncanny ability to intercept Soviet space communications. Their recordings, made decades ago, are spectral echoes from a forgotten past, chillingly suggesting missions that ended in disaster, long before official Soviet records acknowledged any human spaceflight. Their first truly unsettling intercept allegedly occurred on May 17, 1960. Long before Gagarin, the brothers claimed to have picked up faint, frantic signals, a craft veering off course, a human voice asking for help, speaking in broken Russian, SOS to the world. We were losing speed. The message faded, beating only static. Was this a test flight? A precursor to Vostok? The Soviets, of course, denied any such mission. Then came November 28, 1960. The Giudica Cordiglia brothers recorded what they believed to be a drifting space capsule, its occupant's heartbeat fading into silence. No official mission matched this description, but it was in February 1961, just 2 months before Gagarin's triumph, that they claimed to have intercepted something truly extraordinary. A woman's voice, speaking Russian, her breathing heavy, strained. "Is it not dangerous? I am hot." The transmission cut out. Was this Ludmila Tikova, one of the alleged female cosmonauts whose existence was later denied? The very idea of a Soviet woman in space, years before Valentina Tereshkova, was dismissed as impossible by official sources. The recordings continued. On May 15, 1961, just weeks after Gagarin's celebrated return, the brothers claimed to have picked up a capsule bouncing off the atmosphere, a pilot's panicked breathing, his voice distorted by G-forces, before silence. Then, in October 1962, a more chilling transmission, a craft seemingly leaving Earth orbit, faint distress calls. "I see a flame. I am hot." Some speculate this was cosmonaut Ivan Kocher, whose existence is entirely unconfirmed by Russian archives. The Giudica Cordiglia brothers asserted they had recorded his final moments, a pilot lost in the vastness of space, burning up on re-entry or drifting into the void. And in May 1963, they recorded what sounded like multiple voices, faint and strained, from what they believed was a multi-person capsule, before the transmission abruptly ceased. These recordings, if authentic, paint a horrifying picture of a space program willing to sacrifice lives and erase their very memory for the sake of propaganda and the space race. The scientific community remains deeply divided on the Giudica Cordiglia recordings. Skeptics point to the possibility of misinterpretations, hoaxes, or even intercepted terrestrial communications. The recordings are often grainy, open to multiple interpretations, and the brothers themselves, while passionate, were amateurs. Yet the persistent denial from Moscow, even after the partial opening of archives, only fuels the enduring mystery. Why such categorical silence on these specific claims, while other tragedies were eventually acknowledged? The truth is, the nature of Soviet secrecy was absolute. In a system where state prestige was paramount, failure was not an option. It was a weakness, a chink in the ideological armor that could not be tolerated. The human cost of such ambition was immense, not just in lives lost, but in identities erased. The declassified documents have brought Star-Some-Star names out of the shadows, confirmed Star-Some-Star tragedies. but they have also highlighted the vast unexplored territories of Soviet history that remain hidden. The enduring stories of the phantom cosmonauts stand as a haunting testament to the ultimate price of the space race, a chilling reminder that for some, the quest for the stars ended not in glory, but in an unacknowledged silence that stretches across the decades, echoing still in the vast cold emptiness of space. The question remains, how many truly vanished without a trace, their fates forever locked away in files that may never see the light of day? From the dawn of the space age, a profound silence shrouded the Soviet Union's cosmic ambitions. While Sputnik's triumphant beep echoed across the globe and Yuri Gagarin became a global hero, another narrative was being meticulously constructed behind the Iron Curtain. One of unwavering success, flawless execution, and an almost superhuman resolve. But beneath this gleaming facade lay a void, a chilling emptiness where truth should have been. This was the unseen cost of an ideological battle, a relentless pursuit of prestige that would sacrifice not just resources, but the very fabric of human acknowledgement. The Soviet state, driven by the intense pressures of the Cold War and an unyielding commitment to projecting an image of socialist superiority, perfected the art of historical revisionism. Catastrophes were not merely downplayed, they were eradicated from official memory. Accidents, failures, and especially human casualties became non-existent. This culture of silence was not an oversight. It was a deliberate systemic policy enforced by the full might of the KGB and the Communist Party. To admit failure was to admit weakness, and weakness was anathema to the Soviet ideal. Star, pacing cue. Slow, reflective, star, this pervasive secrecy created a fertile ground for whispers, legends, and the enduring mystery of the phantom cosmonauts. These were the alleged pioneers who, according to persistent rumors and some compelling, albeit controversial evidence, ventured into the unforgiving void of space and never returned, their fates forever erased from the annals of official history. They were the ones who, if they existed, paid the ultimate price, not just with their lives, but with their very identities. Their stories were denied to their families, to their nation, and to the world, leaving behind only shadows and unanswered questions. The machinery of silence was sophisticated and brutal. Families of those involved in sensitive programs were often kept in the dark, fed vague explanations, or simply told their loved ones had vanished. Records were altered, photographs doctored, and any dissent or inquiry met with swift and severe consequences. The chilling disappearance of individuals from official rosters was not uncommon. This wasn't just about protecting state secrets. It was about maintaining a narrative of infallibility, a psychological weapon in the global ideological struggle against the West. While the burgeoning American space program, despite its own share of tragedies like the Apollo 1 fire, operated with a relative degree of transparency, the Soviet system ensured that its failures remained unseen, unheard, and unmourned. Star, pacing cue. Building tension, somber star. Consider the persistent claims surrounding alleged pre-Gagarin flights. The most famous proponents of the phantom cosmonaut theory were the Italian amateur radio enthusiasts, brothers Achille and Lodovico Giudica Cordiglia. From their listening post near Turin in the early 1960s, they claimed to have intercepted a series of transmissions that painted a far grimmer picture than the official Soviet narrative. In November 1960, they reported picking up a faint SOS signal from a craft veering off course. In February 1961, just weeks before Gagarin's flight, they allegedly recorded the desperate, accelerating heartbeat and gasps of a dying cosmonaut, followed by silence. Later, in May 1961, they claimed to have intercepted a female voice, seemingly lost and distressed, transmitting from orbit. These intercepts, while never officially corroborated and often met with skepticism, fueled the legends. Were these the voices of unacknowledged heroes, victims of early, failed attempts to conquer space? Were they high-altitude balloonists like those in the DOSAF program, whose experimental flights sometimes ended in tragedy, but whose connection to the space program was deliberately obscured? The true human cost extends beyond just the potential loss of life. It encompasses the psychological burden on families who might have known or suspected their loved ones' fates, but were forbidden from speaking, living under a constant pall of fear and unspoken grief. Their silence was not merely passive, it was an enforced complicity in the grand deception. Star pacing cue. Deliberate, analytical. Star. The profound impact of this state secrecy on historical understanding cannot be overstated. For decades, the official Soviet narrative presented a sanitized, triumphalist account of its space endeavors. This distorted history denied future generations a complete and accurate picture of one of humanity's most ambitious undertakings. Historians and researchers, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, faced an immense challenge. They had to sift through fragmented archives, declassified documents, often incomplete or still redacted, and a labyrinth of rumor and counter-propaganda, both Western and Soviet, to piece together the truth. The difficulty in distinguishing fact from fiction became a defining characteristic of studying the early Soviet space program. The very act of inquiry into these phantom cosmonauts was for a long time considered subversive. Even today, with greater access to some historical records, many questions remain unanswered. The intentional destruction of documents, the strategic omission of names from records, and the pervasive culture of fear meant that much of the true story may never be fully recovered. The official silence left an enduring vacuum, a blank space where the names, faces, and stories of potential pioneers should have been. Star pacing cue, hopeful yet melancholic. Star, the quest for closure for these potential victims and their families continues, driven by a profound human need for truth and acknowledgement. Even if the phantom cosmonauts remain largely unproven legends, their enduring presence in the collective consciousness speaks to a deeper hunger, a desire to recognize all who dared to venture into the unknown, regardless of the political narrative that sought to erase them. Modern researchers, journalists, and space enthusiasts tirelessly pursue clues, cross-reference newly available information, and revisit old theories, hoping to shed light on these darkest corners of space history. This pursuit is not merely academic, it is a moral imperative. To acknowledge these unacknowledged sacrifices is to affirm the value of every human life, regardless of the political system under which it was lived or lost. It is to challenge the notion that a state's ambition can ever justify the erasure of individual existence. For families who may still harbor faint hopes or lingering questions, even a partial truth, decades later, could offer a measure of peace. But the intentional obfuscation means that true definitive closure may forever remain elusive, a haunting echo in the vastness of space and time. Star, pacing cue. Contemplative concluding. Star. The legacy of Soviet secrecy extends far beyond the space program itself. It stands as a stark reminder of the profound dangers of unchecked state power and the devastating impact of suppressing truth. The phantom cosmonauts, whether real individuals lost to the void or symbolic figures representing the countless unacknowledged sacrifices of a totalitarian regime, serve as a potent warning. Their stories, even in their absence, compel us to ask uncomfortable questions about history, memory, and the human cost of ambition. The ghosts of the Soviet space program continue to float silently, a poignant testament to those who dared to reach for the stars, only to be swallowed by the silence of a system that demanded perfection above all else, leaving behind only whispers in the cosmic wind. Subscribe to Study Z for more contents like these.